Hi, we have Emi Takemura with us today, and she's a serial entrepreneur who is striving to create social impact through technology and creativity. Hi, Emi. I would love for you to introduce yourself to our audience and let us know what all you are up to these days.
Hi, nice to meet you. My name's Emmy. Um, I started out my career kind of more in imagine consulting and the tech world back in the early 90s when the internet is just starting to boom and flourish. So I've been with multiple international companies such as Amazon and Excite and Disney, mainly being on the side of product and business development. But that experience has kind of really helped me find peers to really ideate the things that we want to build that kind of seeded into founding of a ptix.com, which is a global event management startups, mainly focused on Asia, but available around 27 countries around the world with over 10 million users registered already. So that startup was the co-found I'm a co-founder, and it was founded with originally six former Amazon COJP members. Now it became four, but we really kind of helped build the business from scratch. And I spearheaded the chief marketing officer role as well as the strategy role. Originally started in Japan, and then also launched the business in Southeast Asia, especially mainly in Singapore, Malaysia. And after building the business to post Series A stage, I have two children, and I decided to focus my energy into education because I've been interested in social impact work through event management platform as well. But I realized education is one of the fundamental areas of that I can help enable change since it's so close to my home with kids, as well as my education experience being in a very traditional school was a big roadblocker me becoming a leader and innovator and creative leader. So I felt that I could contribute back into society by starting a foundational type of company in Japan. It's called Ippanshadan Hojin. So I have two Hojin, Ippanshadan Hojin called Future EDU, Future Edu, and Learn by Creation. And these two organizations, we aim to really stir up a big conversation about how do we reimagine our education in the area when we see LLM and all these technologies really changing the world we live today.
Absolutely brilliant, Emmy. I mean, I see that's your second startup already, and the first one was PTX, which was, I think, a humongous success in Japan, right? Could you highlight some of the key challenges you encountered when starting PTX in particular, at that time? Because it was really much earlier in the time, and I think that time Japan was also not known so much for startups, right?
Yes, there are multiple challenges starting in 2010 was the original when the original idea was sort of born. There was just not that many startup movements happening during that time. So access to venture capital, there's very much fewer venture capital, especially at seed stage available during that time. And B, Japan is a very conservative or traditional country compared to perhaps some other Western nations. So for big for any customer to trust a new internet company for their important business, like events and things like that, is a big hurdle. So getting people to be aware of the possibility the internet unlocks as a new distribution medium for their event or problem solving tool by having one-stop shop for event page creation to payment to marketing. It took a while for us to really figure out how to communicate the value to the customers and see. I'm a woman and I had a startup founders that are male, so I had a kind of hybrid team in terms of genders, but in terms of me being a female leader, I really have to kind of step it up and figure out what would be an effective role for me as a female leader as opposed to male leaders.
Right. And what would you say were the pivotal points where that actually got the idea adopted and kind of you could kind of jump through the hoops?
Yeah, sure. So we were very much inspired by the virtuous business cycle that Amazon was able to create. So we were really kind of figure out what is our virtuous business cycle of growth, where event promoter or event organizer, as well as the participant and PTEX, we can all benefit from this virtuous cycle. So the way we kind of figured out was to really initial stage to uh, listen to the event organizers, really understand their need. How can we reduce the friction that they have in hosting events? And we really focus our energy and limited resources to figure that out. And once that happens, because event organizers are very satisfied, they have a high retention, but also people who came to the event will have a good customer experience. So some of them realize, oh, it's so easy to buy ticket or join the event using PTEX. So when I have my next event, perhaps I'll use PTEX to set up an event page. And so that virtuous cycle started to happen after several years. And once we became established player with enough number of customers in Japan, it started creating a media value. So that was the second stage in terms of building a scalable business model, that we became not just an event ticketing company where we generate revenue from ticketing commissions, but also we became a media platform of a place that people come to discover new interests, new experiences and things like that.
Wow, phenomenal. I mean, I think that definitely shows, like you said, 7 years, it must have been a lot of resilience that you guys had for work. That's something which is a true trait of a startup founder anyway. I also see that, building relationships is crucial in business, and specifically in the one, the events and media industry and now in education industry, right, that you're working in. What are some of the effective networking or relationship strategies you've been, using throughout your career that you can shed light on?
Yes, yes. So to be honest, I don't like the word networking per se. I know it's an important word, but it to me it has a little bit of connotation of you know um, using somebody for your own benefit only. I believe in the power of reciprocal relationships. So especially the giving side of relationship, like giving first. So for PTEX especially, what I really focused or the team focused on at the beginning stages, okay, we have limited technical capabilities as a startup. We have MVP, but how can we add value to our event organizers? So we started building offline community for event organizers, kind of like a university, where we really try to shed light on common best practices or other tools that the event organizers can use, or resources that they can use to enhance their experiences at limited costs. Because our focus is very much SME or smaller scale event organizers, from individual to small groups of people. So they inherently have limited resources. So our community or university were able to really provide I guess networks or the connections and resources and skills and knowledge to them above and beyond the platform that we were building.
So true. I mean, the communities are so much more important than any other relationships that you ever build and when you're building businesses. So I think you're really highlighting that. And did you also have to go through the venture capital, I mean, acquiring capital, or was it more like all bootstrapping? How did that go? And how did you get people on board for that?
Um, Yes, so initially we bootstrapped because we were all part-time employee at the beginning. So we were kind of pumping our own money into it until we discovered the business model that works. So until we actually founded PTEX as a product, we have multiple other products. We initially started out with a digital content distribution company. So we had like a few pivots. And then once we saw PTEX having initial really good traction, that's when we were like, okay, we have to start going to investors and raising capital now because we really needed more resources to scale. But we persevered a good 2 years or so before we reached out to venture capital. Before that, we had our own money and angel round.
Right. And you know, sometimes or most of the times that founders, like I'm also running an incubator and where I have worked with some 150 plus founders. And most of the times founders get stuck even if they have the great idea, traction, but how to reach those investors, you know, the ones who believe in them or really get them invested, which is way beyond just going and, you know, pitching in a pitch fest, right? So could you share some of the strategies as to how did you build relationships with the stakeholders, which could be investors or advisors or board members for that matter, that helped you kind of scale the business further?
Yes. So it definitely helped that we all founders all came from Amazon. So we did have some level of credibility in terms of our business track record from Amazon or the previous companies. Like, for example, I used to work for McKinsey or other companies. So the investors definitely look at the founding team especially when the business model is not proving. So that was one thing we could check off the box. But the other things that we try to do was to really illustrate, it wasn't realized in practice, but the vision of the virtuous business cycle that we were imagining. So although we were still at MVP scale, we already had this vision of, oh, this is how our business would work. And that's why our product, although there's many ticketing companies already in place, the traditional big ticket master type of companies, we try to highlight this is where the blue ocean is, and this is how we think we could differentiate. For example, we were like one of the probably first mobile ticketing platform in the market at that time, and we were the first company targeting the real SME or individual event organizers, and that space was just starting to grow. We knew that like a lot of people are spending more money on experiences rather than for products, building their brands rather than buying expensive clothes. So knowing that trend, also we were able to tell the stories to the investors that this is where the market is going, this is where our product is positioned, and we are unproven, but we have this business model vision that we think is going to work. So that whole package, I think, was convincing for the investors.
Right. So you had the right business model, you had the right market. I mean, you knew exactly what would work in the market as well. And I think you would talk a very
It wasn't proven though. So you
yeah,
had to have a conviction. Yeah.
absolutely. And I think, yeah, that's what I was going to say. That one, you had the conviction and the courage to say, this is going to work, I think. And at the same time, you bring in a very important point here when you said you had all the credibility of having worked with Amazon. and that's something already gives some sort of credibility to you as founders, or people, your team as founders. And I see that you I've been following you quite a bit on LinkedIn, and I see that you've been associating yourself with organizations to work on that credibility regularly. Like, what, right now you're working in the education space, and you've been a representative director at the consortium that provides teaching training, and you're an official columnist for Forbes. You're committee member for UNESCO Japan Committee, and you're also committee member for Social Impact, Fund for Asian Women. So I am certain these are all deliberate and strategic moves that you've made to be able to also, one, serve in the social space, but also be able to gather more momentum for the businesses that you've been doing. I would love to know your insights around that, your personal brand building part of it.
Oh, thanks. A lot of these opportunities were really, in my case, weren't necessarily intentional. They sort of came about, but the reason why it came about is probably because I'm very much, like I said, giving part. I really like to share what I learn. I feel this is my belief that the knowledge alone sitting in your own brain and doesn't produce any value. But if you could share your knowledge to others and others can make use of it, and they might appreciate in some capacity, and these kind of gratitude will come back in some other ways. Maybe this is a very Asian way of thinking about it, but we always think, good fortunes kind of come around. So don't be afraid to share, because a lot of people are afraid sharing because they think, oh, maybe, they'll take my ideas away and they'll use it for their own benefit. But I'm a believer that if you're authentic and sharing your experiences, it's your own, it's nobody else's experiences. So your wisdom, even though it leaves you and it becomes some public domain knowledge, people recognize it. People know that, oh, it's, Emmy or it's Dipti who actually shared that message. And these news travel around, and I think it becomes part of your credibility, and people know that, oh, she's somebody you can trust. And what if we ask her for this role? And so I think I'm blessed that somebody taught me this philosophy very early on in my career, that I've been practicing that over years. And especially as a marketer or one of the founders, you have to really tell your stories, but nobody want to listen to just your own story forever, right? Like, it's interesting, but it's more about what you can share that could be useful for other people. So I've been really kind of cognizant in terms of, oh, for if whenever I meet someone, like, oh, what it is that this person needs, and I can be helpful to share,
Very interesting.
whether it's a person or knowledge or book. And
No, I love what you said. It's really like about sharing the knowledge. Some people just think that if they are just out there and talking about what they're doing, it's self-promotion, or it's something which, does not qualify as something they should be doing as founders. But I think what you're saying is really so true, that, you should be actually putting out your thought leadership, because when you're sharing knowledge, it comes back to you and people start seeing you in a more credible way. So I love the message there that you're putting out. Um, Also, since we're talking about Japan, and all your startups have been Japan focused, but right now you're living in the in the Pacific area, in US. What are some of the unique characteristics or strengths of Japanese startup ecosystems, according to you? As you've seen as an entrepreneur in your entrepreneurial journey, and also if you really compare that to the US or Silicon Valley where you're in right now, yeah, how would you compare that?
I think there's a lot of strengths in Japanese startups, especially around the area of teamwork. I'm advising not one startup in Japan right now as well, in a pretty intimate way, and the level of willingness people show to roll up their sleeves and um, either speak up or try to take a role of the area that's not their immediate job description area, just so that the company can succeed is pretty incredible. And I felt that way when we were starting out as a PTIX as well. That of course we have job description and everybody has their area of expertise, but if we're short in some area, like let's say in the event space, and in the early years, because we wanted to have a first-hand knowledge, we used to actually go to the event and help even like run an event, just so that we have a real understanding of how the event operates. And that wasn't a role for our technical person, or that wasn't a role for our finance person. But like at the beginning, everyone wanted to be part of this movement. So like if we are short staffed, our finance person is like, okay, I can go today. So that type of collectivist spirit as a I'm sure it happens everywhere in startups, but in Japan, I think it's really pronounced as something that people can feel proud of. And you can see that same type of teamwork strengths in sports, like when Japanese teams play soccer and things like that too. Like teamwork is what gets them unique, rather than sort of pure skills or individual skills.
Absolutely. This is something I can vouch for right now because, as part of this innovation tour in Japan that we're organizing, we have a sizable number of Japanese leaders, and they're all hands-on and collaborative, and they just get in. Even if it's not required of them to do things, I mean, they would just jump in and help you out, and they don't think about if is this part of my responsibility or not. They just want to make things happen and make things happen in a good way. So clearly, I mean, you're pointing out the same kind of teamwork and collaboration. And I think startups, especially when you're working as co-founders, right, it's so much more important. And also in terms of the teams that you're building and the culture of a startup that you're building. So great insight there. In terms of the global perspective, like I said, you are in US right now. So with your international education, work experience, also your, being there, how do you bring that global perspective to your initiatives in Japan, startups and education sector now in Future Edu, for instance?
Sure. Especially, well, in tech sector as well, but especially now I'm really focused on the education. I'm really trying to bridge the knowledge between Japan and the US. The education systems look different between Japan and the US, but the core issue is very similar. It's having issue transitioning from.
So you need to really build your trust network. So people who back you up and endorse you as somebody trustworthy to talk to, especially the investor communities tend to be a little bit more senior. So if you plug yourself into communities outside of the company, because company community tends to be pretty narrow. But so if it could be alumni, or I used to do a lot of social impact pro bono work, or any other nonprofit or impact work organization, you would meet a lot of really good people who can back you up as well.
Right. I mean, you are circling it back to building good relationships who can actually help you then thrive in what you're trying to do. Great insights there, Amy. I mean, really wonderful talking to you. Before we leave, one last question. What are your long-term goals and aspirations for Future Edu?
Thank you for asking. My big aspiration is to really help reach that 25% that you mentioned in your video about creating a movement where anywhere in Japan, whether it's urban or rural, people can really think in their own feet and how do I chart my education journey as opposed to just ingesting what's given from the textbook or from the ancient curriculum that we have. Because this day and age, as you all know, LLM is reached 1 million user in the shortest amount of time in the tech history, or we just see so many changes happening right in front of our eyes, and our curriculum being rigid and revised only every 10 years is just not acceptable. So I would really like to kind of reach that 25% of people who really want to own their education journey, have more agencies, and speak up and change their environments.
Awesome. I do hope your idea does turn into a movement, and I have no doubts that it will reach minimum 25%, but even more people in Japan. And yeah, best of luck for your this new venture, and absolutely thank you so much for your insights.
Thank you so much. Really enjoy our conversation.
So we have Erika Suzuki with us. She is an angel investor, a startup consultant, and a director of Tokyo Women VC. She has been investing as a VC for the last 7 years, and we are super excited to have her. And hi, Eriko. I'm very happy and very glad to talk to you, and would love to know more about you and what you've done in your background.
Thank you. Hi, Deepti. Yes, maybe I could do a quick intro of myself. So I'm based in Tokyo. My whole career has been in Tokyo, but luckily I actually have lived abroad. So I lived in the US, Canada, the Middle East, a little bit in Southeast Asia. But again, came back here in Japan for my career, started out in investment banking and finance. And then I went on to an operator role at a startup and really caught the startup bug, and brought over a drone startup from Silicon Valley to Japan, worked with large enterprise companies in Japan, and really had a great experience. And since then, I combined the experiences in finance and startups to become a VC. And throughout my VC career, I've been primarily an impact investor. So impact-minded investor, working for family office type structure, and other funds as well, and invested globally. Again, in the US, East and West Coast companies, Europe, from Estonia to we had a portfolio company in Italy, and also Southeast Asia as well. So Singapore, companies expanded into Indonesia, etc. And right now, very privileged and lucky to be able to work a little bit more flexibly as an angel, investing my own money. I'm part of several angel syndicates across the world, and I get to consult startups and also corporations around big, open innovation, etc. And I help them, with various things. So for startups, strategizing about fundraising, fine-tuning their equity story, connecting them, of course, to other investors, and in thinking about global expansion. And for corporations, it could be around, how to work better with startups, but also around the ESG impact side, how they can do more meaningful projects that are aligned to their overall purpose and mission. And finally, I'm also part of Tokyo Women in VC, started by 2 women, and now I'm part of the director role as well. And we are growing our membership, which is really exciting at this point in Japan.
Wow, you've had an inspiring career. I mean, when I was looking through your profile, I was like, wow, this woman, she's truly somebody who a force to reckon with. But tell me, I mean, it's amazing to see a career like that in Japan as a woman, which is primarily or traditionally seen as a more close society for women, at least, or not. Not many women you would see in this kind of role or this kind of career that you've had. What's the secret, if I may ask, in terms of, what have you done that has really led to such a phenomenal career that you've had?
Yes, thank you for saying that. Not at all, and I'm still, learning every day. But I think what has really helped me is a lot of the mistakes I made and the failures. So just perhaps my personality, my upbringing, living abroad in various places, has gotten me to become a very kind of agile, flexible-minded person with a lot of curiosity as well. And so I haven't been too afraid to fail, whether it was jumping into finance. And even though my education was more in, theoretical economics, I didn't really think about business until I actually wanted to work more in impact. So I went to Africa and realized, the power of business when I was there. And so I wanted to get into the world of business and finance. So I learned, I learned through mistakes. So I've made a lot of mistakes in those industries. And grateful to find people that would help me through those mistakes and help me learn. And to be very honest, it's not easy to find those mentors or coaches or colleagues in general. But when you do find them, I think it's important to keep that connection. So I've made mistakes throughout the way, each step, but yes, I've learned from them and been able to do what I really would like to do authentically, which ultimately I think our companies, our startup portfolio companies, et cetera, I hope they are able to do as well.
Well, I mean, I took 2 points from concrete points from what you said right now. One is, of course, not failing, not having the fear to fail is something which you talk about, which I say the same thing as saying having the courage to just go out there and have that conviction that you can do it, even if you fail, but at least try it, right? And the other one, a very important one, which most people do not talk about, is having the importance of having mentors, sponsors, coaches who can, if you build the right relationships with, can actually be very vital to your success, no matter whether you're a corporate or you're a startup or you're a VC or no matter what you do, right? So very, very interesting that you throw light on that. Have you, I mean, since you've been in the investing space for so long and now also you're angel investing, and very, very closely working with the founders, do you see any of the founders who have been doing well? Do they have a particular mix of any of the things that you're talking about, or is it a different set of skills that they need to succeed?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great question. So the founders, of course, are even much more courageous than myself. I stumble through a lot of these things, but the founders, I think, indeed, the ones that I've seen really succeed, and by succeed, of course, it's not always just about these metrics, but I think it is a feat to grow a business to a certain size and exit that whole journey about 7-10 years. Not the only success isn't defined by that, but I feel like for those types of founders, I've seen that they have a combination of a real deep sense of a big vision or purpose or aim, but also they have such a resilience to make small pivots or be open to feedback, be open to trial and error. I think that combination is very unique and but key.
So in light of that, I mean, that's a great segue into the next question that I wanted to ask you anyway, was what indicators suggest that a founder possesses a compelling vision for their startup?
Yes, yeah. So I invest primarily in early stage over the last 7+ years, and even as an angel now. So, I speak to these founders several times before I make an investment decision. And I try to do it in different settings so that we're able to see them kind of have a 360 kind of view on them. And I also think references are important as well. So I try to triangulate information. And with that, when founders have a vision, yes, it seems like it's very clear that they see a certain market being a certain way. As an impact investor, for example, it could be around mental health, that more people will have much better access to mental health, for example, and they just seem to see it very much. And it's, and again, not all founders need to be this way, but for venture capital backed ones, they are able to foresee, $100 million at least in revenue per year, in the next, 5, 7, at least 10 years. So they're really able to see that worldview. And they also at the same time understand, not blind to the current market itself. They really deeply understand the current market and what are the problems. And they are very frustrated by the problems themselves personally a lot of the times. And so they see a very different world. I find that a great component.
Absolutely. I mean, I think so many times, and when I get to see so many startups and founders all the time, it's one thing is about thinking about a product and an idea as to how to make it work and how the consumers would react to it. But eventually they have to grow, and that growth has to be something that one has to be able to imagine, and not just in numbers, but also in terms of the scale that it would assume, where I typically call it a founder transitions to becoming a CEO. And the role that typically a very early stage founders have transforms into more of a leadership role, which is completely different from the one who just started out with, just a small idea and that vision, right? So in terms of assessing those founders' leadership qualities, and I would rather say their ability to inspire and lead a team, not just leading a product, bringing a product to market, but leading a team or leading a big business or scaling it. How do you assess that? Like, what are those qualities that you're looking for in founders?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think it's not easy, and we get it wrong a lot too. But I think over the years, we've learned some things, and I think there are two skill sets that are quite different for that founder as a leader. So one is internal facing. How do they deal with their internal team, their CTOs or other executive roles? But then there's also, how do they manage their external stakeholders? And fundraising is such a big part of the venture journey. And those two tend to be a little bit different. Some I've seen are really good at raising money and managing, not necessarily, managing their stakeholders, but because fundraising is such a process, it's not very authentic relationship building, I would say, per se, depending on how you do it. But they're very good at that. But internally, their team and trust could be a little bit different. So I, as an impact investor, we really look at the entirety, both internal stakeholder management and external stakeholder management. And for the external one, kind of the transparency, integrity is very important, and how you share information in a timely manner and an honest manner is important. And then for internally, it's also trust, but whether they really have that will in the first place of how they want to manage their team. And it could be different. Some companies value speed, some companies value big vision. It's okay, but having a clear definition of it and making sure that there is not a mismatch within the team for those values. Yes, I think those are kind of important skills.
I mean, I completely agree with, the managing the external stakeholders and managing the internal team. One of the things that I have always found that is the most difficult thing especially for an unproven idea and somebody who's a first-time founder, is not even to fundraise. Fundraising is still possible. What is not easy is getting talent, good talent, to be recruited to the team because you are not guaranteed big salaries right at the start, and as talent, you are not even getting a good brand to work with. You're not even, it's just the founder vision that you have that attracts the teams, right? The early teams. And for that, you should be able to sell your vision and not just talk about your vision. I mean, with investors, you're talking about, what's going to go and what they're going to get as return. But as the early team, there's so much more that you need to sell. So do you have any stories where any founder did an excellent job of recruiting the first team? And how did they go about it? And what did they actually invest in, for instance?
Sure. I think two things come to mind. So one is recruiting, of course, is very important, but I want to touch upon kind of cultural differences, maybe. So being in Japan, and I've invested globally, and to be very honest, the beginning parts of my VC investment were much more focused outside than Japan because the Japanese startup market was still small. So it was, barely touching upon, several $billion per year investment into startups, which is, 1/50th of the US size. Now it's gone up to around 8-9 billion per year. And so it's grown much more. But so the Japanese startup, what's different for some founders, I think, were much, not to be too stereotypical and generalize, but less people are more kind of, very extroverted and very much about self-branding. So I've seen strong founders in Japan rely on the previous relationships that they've made. So whether they've worked together in different contexts and try to tap into those networks for their initial team, which I think is great because it's built upon trust. And it's related to that, but Japanese strong founders, I find, really have a sense of, let me show you how hard I work and how committed I am to this. So not just the talk part about the big vision, but they really run around in the first, early stages, really trying to speak to potential customers, building out that product, et cetera. So I think there's an interesting cultural element. And in other cases, even globally, but I do believe that acquiring an A team from previous contacts and previous colleagues is it helps a lot. And as you know, co-founder relationships can become very challenging. That's one of the first issues and the biggest issues that early stage companies come upon. And that happens when there used to be a vision alignment and a mission alignment. They're very excited about it, but they haven't actually really worked together. They were friends or so I find that when they've worked together in the past, it works much better. Or if there's other types of social networks and ecosystems that they can tap into so that they are accountable to each other in a meaningful, deep way. But that's one sample, and not all startups are alike, but that's what I see.
Now, and you touched upon a very, very important difference in cultural difference in Japan, and of course, I think you were mentioning more US, and talk about personal brand as well, that how important that is for founders, for everybody, but for founders specifically when they go first time raising their funds, or even recruiting the team, or for that matter, even building clients, the first customers, and I believe the credibility that at least I have seen of all the people I've interviewed so far. There is also a personal brand, but it just relates to the kind of work they've done. They've been either with the companies like McKinsey's or, Google, and that sort of lends that brand. That lends that credibility. You get the references from there. You get the, kind of. If you've been there, that means that you've been doing some good work there, etc. So I think that credibility is still very important, but it just takes a different form of how you get it, right? But at the same time, in terms of building trust, a lot of the things that work for most of the people outside, at least in the research that I've seen, is also, if you're a thought leader in a certain segment, let's say you were talking about mental health and well-being. Let's say if you have been doing some sort of work around that area, even without having to do your startup, but if you're going to events and presenting your thought leadership, or if you're going and talking about it, or you're building communities around it, or you're having social media following around that topic, there is a high probability that people would find you credible in that field. If you're starting a startup, then out of nowhere, if you just came one day and said, listen, I want to work in edtech, and you've had no education background, right? So that also is part of personal branding, and that's what I've seen in globally. How much does it also relate to Japanese culture in your view, and what have you seen?
Yes, yeah, the cultural difference does exist. So, but not to be, not to stereotypical, but I think it does exist to some extent. So not everyone is like this. But for the personal branding kind of thought leadership in Japan, it's still in the early days, I think. So maybe you've noticed the LinkedIn usage is not that common yet in Japan. I mean, it's finally gotten to a place where we see more VCs and startups there. But just 5 years ago, 3 years ago, even, it wasn't as active. So it's a little bit of a different landscape. Twitter is, of course, big in Japan. Actually, it's one of, an X now, it's one of the biggest markets, but in the VC startup ecosystem, it's quite big in Japan, but less, I would say, thought leadership, but just more kind of very ecosystem chatter, which is great. Of course, there's some people that are thought leaderships in certain areas like AI, et cetera, but it's more about up-to-date VC startup news uh, conversations. But that said, so there's that. There's also the consumerization of the enterprise world hasn't really happened yet. In Japan, I think you will hear a lot of DX. DX is a buzzword in Japan for the last several years, which is digital transformation for large companies or more traditional legacy industries. And so that digitalization hasn't happened yet. A lot of things in every industry, whether it's, healthcare or manufacturing, it's paper-based. And so even that hasn't happened. So there isn't a sense of, the more consumerization of work and people following new ideas within this, industry, et cetera. So it's a little bit different. But that said, again, that branding is important. So we see more and more founders in Japan coming from those consulting backgrounds, or maybe sometimes banking backgrounds, or some of the other tech companies that have grown in Japan over the last 20 years, less the legacy companies, but maybe the Rakutens, the Recruits. These are great spaces for innovative younger people to have worked in, because at those companies they're able to run new businesses in such a fast way that they have kind of an entrepreneurial startup mindset already. And then I see a lot of them jumping into entrepreneurship.
Right. Thanks for great insights. And I have to say, I found out the rough way that people are not using LinkedIn in Japan, because as I set out to do interviews, I was looking for everyone on LinkedIn. I was taking out the list of top entrepreneurs in Japan and then going and searching for LinkedIn, and nobody existed. I was like, oh my God, where are all these entrepreneurs? I found them on Twitter and Instagram, and through some warm connections. So I believe you. LinkedIn is not so well used in Japan. So no, great. I think those were great insights. I want to touch upon one last question, if you have time before you leave. I know you've been right now working with Women VC, group. As I saw one of the events that you were working on, you had a talk on, which was how to break gender bias. So I do know that this topic is dear to your heart. I would love to know, what differences do you see in female founders and male founders, in particularly in Japan? And what could women in particular do as founders to help them break that bias and help them succeed and advance, in your opinion?
Yes, such a great topic and passion of mine. So just to kind of, set the tone. So I'm part of Tokyo Women in VC, one of the 4 directors. And our mission is to enable more diversity in the venture capital space, the investor space, because we feel like that leads to better investments, which, statistically it's proven that, if there are female investors, the investment amount that goes into female founders rises, right? Not just because, women are more biased towards women, but just because we're able to see those opportunities more. It makes it more accessible for female founders to reach out to investors. It's very difficult for them to have access to VCs that look all men and they all look the same. So that's our mission, Tokyo Women in VC. And the number of VC that are female in Japan are growing, which is great. So with that, we're also doing a lot of work for female founders as well, because we want to empower them. And we have monthly office hours for female founders where they can ask VCs anything. And usually, when you talk to VC, you're pitching your idea, you want to look good, you want to present your metrics, but we want to create a safe space for them to talk about, well, I'm actually having trouble with my CTO, or I'm actually, going to have a child next, and how can I balance my, role as a founder? So we create those spaces. And so we're excited to do more, and we're always hoping to work with other people. But for female founders in Japan, I think just the absolute number is so low still. So we need more people playing the field for them. And out of that, we want to see more successful founders actually do an exit. In Japan, oftentimes that's an IPO. So we want them to do an IPO and, or, get acquired in a great way. We've seen some successes over the last few years, but we really want to see that, so that representation matters. The more we see successful cases, we see that people will jump out of corporate jobs to start companies. So, it's a high level comment that I'm making, but the more success cases there are, I'm sure there will be more growing numbers. But to get there, I think there are now accelerator programs for female founders and incubator programs, which is great. So just go. And today's age, information around startups, building companies is relatively more available. So it's really about taking that leap and having that big vision to do that startup journey. And so it's an issue, a matter of confidence. And we hope to empower and make women feel more confident through communities. So I think that's important.
It's just such a great message. And when you say, the representation matters, I totally believe that. Like I told you in the beginning about the book that I've written, and the whole idea about writing that book was talking about success stories that come from people of color, women, or typically people who you do not see so many of them, even though they are succeeding, you just don't hear their stories. So one is representation matters, that they come out and they do it. But I think even more important is we talk about their stories. And you yourself are one of those stories, and I'm happy to bring forward your story as well to the world. So thank you so much. Thank you so much for your time, Eriko.
Thank you. It was great speaking with you.
Atsuko, welcome. I would love to hear your story and tell us more about yourself and about Atom Capital.
Okay, thank you. My name is Atsuko Tsuchiya. I founded Atom Capital Management, which is an independent asset management firm, founded by myself in 2008. So we've been up and running for about 16 years. I would say in Japan, there's not that many hedge fund women managers. So we're one of the few. And our current team consists of 2 women investment professionals. And I think we are probably the only hedge fund in Japan who have only 2, meaning 2 women managing the fund.
Wow, that's really inspiring. Not only in Japan, I would say globally, it's very inspiring to hear that. Can you share with us some parts of your entrepreneurial journey where you highlight the key moments or challenges that required extraordinary determination or courage? Or maybe some defining moment or a story that continues to inspire you and others?
Okay. Well, first of all, I think it's quite challenging to launch your own hedge fund because what's different with startup businesses is that we normally don't have external investors investing in the firm itself. So the people who launch their own hedge fund, usually all the capital is basically their own capital or, partners' capital within the firm. It's very rare to have external capital like startup firms. So that's one challenge, I would say. I think, financially, you would have to have the capital to manage the firm without getting any external capital, I would say. And the other challenge is that we would need to go out and get capital to do the investments, which is a little bit different from, like the investing in startups where recently or from, several years ago, there's a lot of interest in investing in ventures or startup firms. I think to get capital to invest in public equities is still quite challenging, especially when your investment, I should say, region is just, concentrated on just Japan.
Right. And how was it for you, and what did you do in particular to be able to survive and thrive?
Mm-hmm. Well, one is that I think for me, I have a quite long experience. Basically, all my career, I've been in the investment side, and so the career history, I would say, was helped in getting external capital from investors to actually invest in the fund so that we could actually, start investing. I would say that my career with Citadel was or is still, I think the experience that's really, how should I say, focused by investors, I would say, because Citadel is a very large hedge fund, and the business that we're currently running is a hedge fund, and also the investment strategy is the same. So the experience of managing capital in that firm is something that many allocators that we call investors are focusing on.
Right. And I remember you telling me last time that the asset size in Japan is generally very small, and it's usually below or much below 100 million, right?
That's right, yes.
And you are one of those firms which has been close to that threshold. So congratulations on that. That must require immense determination and courage, as well as a lot of, I would say, personal networking that would get you to that kind of success.
Yeah, so compared to like hedge funds overseas, I think it's very challenging for hedge funds that are focusing just on investing in Japan to gather capital, that gets over 100 million. I think that's a real challenge. And basically, we're always, continuing to market the fund, meet with the allocators who are interested in, investing in the strategy. Others is that we're always open to new businesses, which is not just investing in the fund itself, but also interested in doing business with us, so that if they're interested in some other kind of investments, we could support them as well.
Right. In relation to that, could you also provide some insight into the current state of startup ecosystem? I know you're not directly related to that, but still, do you have insights on how it has evolved over the years?
Yeah. So in terms of like the startup industry, although we're not really into that kind of investment, I would say that from maybe around 7 years ago or so, many Japanese corporates started making their own fund and also investing in like venture capital funds. And so a lot of capital has been allocated to even small startups that maybe doesn't even have the potential to IPO, for example. So I would say like the startup market has been quite it was easier for the startups to raise capital than before these past 7 years or so. I think it's gotten harder because it seems like the allocation of capital by financial industries is kind of shifting a little bit away from the startups into different kind of asset classes. But it's actually, like if you look at it in more longer term, the market's always been quite, interested in investing in startups in Japan.
And that makes complete sense, right? Because Japan certainly boasts a strong foundation in technology innovation, a rich history of inventions and advancements, at least in the corporate sector, right? Also, I mean, as far as I've been keeping up a little bit with the Japanese ecosystem, I mean, I think Japan is really known for its AI and robotics expertise, specializing also in industrial automation. And as I say, if I'm not wrong, if correct me if I'm not wrong, that Tokyo and Osaka are really the major startup hubs that are evolving right now. Various governments, offering programs around and incentives for promoting entrepreneurship. Yeah, it's
yes.
Go ahead.
I think not only Tokyo and Osaka. I mean, they're major cities in Japan, but also like Fukuoka in Kyushu. Yeah, they also have like startup hubs as well. So I think Kyushu is a little bit different from like Tokyo because Tokyo is central of Japan, and so it's kind of doesn't seem like too, how should I say, extreme, even if you have that business growing it there. But Kyushu is it's quite more in the regional area of Japan, and but I would say there's a lot of companies that come out from that area, and so I think that's one of the reasons why you have a lot of startups in Kyushu.
Okay, that's interesting to know as well. I mean, that's why it's always so interesting to talk to locals to understand the system. You can only read about it as much, but what you get to know from locals is always different. Now, Japan has also had a reputation for being risk averse, and historically one of the lowest rates of female entrepreneurship among developed countries. Right, in 2019, only 7.6% Japanese businesses were women owned. Who are clearly a women-owned, women-driven, successful business. So how has it been doing business in Japan as a woman entrepreneur? How did you navigate or overcome the cultural aspects while building building and scaling up your company?
I think it's, there's pros and cons. If as a female entrepreneur, I think because it's not that common, compared to men. I think it draws interest by allocators or investors. That's I would say, the good part about this. But the other is that I think allocators who invest in the business and into the fund, they're always I think more worried or concerned about the contingency of the business if you're a women entrepreneur compared to men. So even if people are interested and they want to meet you, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's easier to raise capital, for example. I think that's a different story. I think you need to, I would say, like the commitment towards the business and management of the business. I think you need to be able to convince these allocators that you're really committed to the business, maybe compared to the male entrepreneurs. It may be a little bit different in that case.
But I also know, like having talked to you a couple of times before, we also spoke about how you actually leverage media in the beginning for your business. How did you creating, establishing your personal brand in this competitive landscape, and how it aided you. So do you have any insights regarding that, but also what other women entrepreneurs or people who are not easily getting funding could leverage some of those areas to build on their ideas?
Yeah, I think Japan is a culture where if you're like in the media, they think that that's kind of that kind of proves your status. And so using the media, like going on media which is like well known, for example, like such as like the Nikkei newspapers or something related to like Financial Times or Wall Street Journal, those kind of financial media in our case, because we're in the financial industry, that kind of helps in branding yourself and also the firm. For us, that's back in 2017, we actually published a book where we were asked by one of the publishing companies in Japan to write a book about the equity market. And for us, this was kind of more like to market or to get our company name known within Japan. And so that was something that we did, besides just going on the media and talking about like the market or getting interviewed by the media, for example.
Great. I mean, you share a very, very good insight here. I mean, we were talking about the book that I have also written recently, which is some of the topics that we are talking here right now. And it's an interesting research that we've also found time and again at Stanford, one of the courses that I coach on, that how little people leverage media to their advantage in terms of self-promoting whatever work they are doing. And most of the times people also feel that it's maybe not so good to invest in self-promotion or putting out any sort of thing which is related to their work. But in essence, it can actually drive your business to another level just by being more visible. And at least I tell people always that if you are looking at doing something great, and if you do not share it with the world, then you are doing disservice, because then you are not actually contributing to the world where you could make an impact, because people do not know you. And you cannot make an impact. Just like in your case, you knew considerable amount of knowledge about equity space, but just because you talked about it, you wrote a book about it, now people take notice of you, right? So very interesting indeed. And I loved all the things that you've done in that space. To be honest, I've been really following you as well a little bit. Whatever is available in the media, I've tried to follow you. Another important and critical aspect of growing any sort of business, one is the idea. Idea has to be good to be able to make it work, but is also the other aspect of it is networking. So share your experience with relationship building and how some pivotal moments or pivotal relationships kind of change the business growth or the trajectory of what you're doing.
So I think when we started this business, basically our client base was institutions, financial institutions, or large institutions. Like our first client was Sumitomo Corporation in Japan because they were doing seeding business for hedge funds. This was back in like 2006 and 7, before Lehman. But after that, we've experienced, with the Lehman crisis, we've had, Sumitomo Corporation pull out their capital, even though it was during the lockup period. And so basically we had, several months which we had no income. And what we did after that was that we tried to build a client base which was more diversified and not biased to corporates where the capital coming from corporates isn't how should I say, like and not just corporates but also like the financial institution allocators. Mainly it's not their core business or it's not their own capital. For example, like the financial industries, it's usually capital that they're getting from their investors. For corporates, unless you're like an investment firm, the main business, like for example, Sumitomo Corporation's main business is not investing in hedge funds. So when the company's earnings are doing poorly, they would have to reduce on the non-core businesses, and so that's how we were impacted by that, their business decision. And so what we did with our client base was that we tried to focus more on private wealth and, family offices where, it's their own capital. They can make a decision on their own. Also that, business relationship with these private wealth and family offices tend to be longer than, or how should I say, not longer, but like more stronger compared to corporations. And so we changed our client base to shift more onto that kind of business. And so for us, it was easier to initially it's smaller, but it's easier to build a long-term relationship. And so that's one thing that we did to grow our network within like the Japan private wealth area, which is quite time consuming because these people, it's not every day that you meet, private wealth in Japan. And so you need to build a relationship with like private bankers in Japan, people who know, founders of, corporations, also entrepreneurs and things like that. So we needed to spend quite a lot of time on networking.
Yeah, and I see you've been also very strategic about it, which is also important, right? Prioritizing which are the areas and where you should be actually putting your energies in terms of relationship building. Mm-hmm. Just curious about this, but so maybe it is exactly the way it works globally as well. But how does relationship building and networking work in Japan? Like, is that more like you get together on events, or you did more of getting warm introductions? How did you actually build?
Yeah, it's like it's usually, I would say, more like a friendly type of, it's not like an official type of networking, I would say. Maybe like there are a lot of, networking type of events, but I don't really like those events. So I tend to just go to, like gatherings that's set up by my, friends, not just within the financial industry, but in other kinds of industries as well. And so you are able to meet a lot of people, and especially like after I established my company, I think the network base changed. Like before, when I was working with large institutions, and the people that I that I knew and were friends with were mainly people within the industry. But after I started my business, kind of like the network, you know people around me, I think they changed to people who are actually like entrepreneurs themselves. And so from there, you get to know these people, and you would hear about their interest in investing their assets, and that's how you kind of build that into like a more business type of relationship.
Right. What I also hear is that you actually invest in very diverse kind of networks as well, which is again very important because most of us just tend to have the networks of family and friends, people we know, and then you cannot get a lot of information from there. You really need having a diverse set of network to be able to drive value from your network.
Yeah.
Great ideas there. Maybe one of the last questions here. I mean, again, focusing a little bit on the women entrepreneurs in particular. Did you see all of these things we're talking about in terms of engaging in relationship building, going out, networking, building a brand? Do you see a little bit of difference between how women and men pursue the same roles?
I think networking in Japan, if you're men, it's much easier because there's so many entrepreneurs who are men. And so I think it's easier to get to know people, who are running a business on their own, especially if you have your own business as well. But if you're a woman, I think more of the, how should I say? It's easier to get closer to, to the same gender entrepreneur more than the other, I would say. So that's one of the reasons why I think that men entrepreneurs are easier to get, a broader or, range of entrepreneurs, because I think there's a much more larger pool of, entrepreneurs if you're a man. But for women entrepreneurs in Japan, it's not such a large pool of, people. And so that kind of, may limit the amount of people that you meet.
And what advice would you have to aspiring women entrepreneurs in Japan who may be facing these kind of challenges?
For me, like I've never really, how should I say it though? Acknowledge myself as like in terms of like gender wise, like I don't really think about my gender when I'm doing business. So I think kind of, to be neutral in a way when you're doing business is may help business wise and also like networking wise as well. Because like if you're too extreme on either side, especially in Japan, it could be like, it may, how should I say, the networking, even for like the networking events that I go to, the number of women within like the entrepreneur networking is very small. So I would say maybe only about, like, even if there's the same number of women and men, in terms of entrepreneurs, the women, I would say maybe there's only like 10% or so. So I think, how should I say, like if you would need to go to events which are, mixed in terms of gender, but it's kind of difficult to find, the same type of people, like women entrepreneurs, even if you go to these events.
Right. No, thank you. I mean, that's good insight again. And I know that from the research that I did as well, that women most of the times tend to box themselves as women, and that's why are not able to cut the bias that is often approached towards them. And most often people who actually do well despite gender, color, whatever, are those who do not self-identify themselves as such, but they really are neutral about all those things, and they just don't think that much about the background and the culture they're coming from, which
exactly
ends up being a big plus, right? So no, great that you kind of confirming that insight as well. Thank you so much, Atsuko. I mean, that was lovely talking to you. Amazing insights there, and best of luck to the new, the next ventures that you are building with your company.
Mhm.
Hi, welcome, Koki. It's so nice to have you. Will be amazing to be having a conversation around FAMI, and you are the founder of FAMI. But I would love to know about your own entrepreneurial journey so far.
Thank you for having a chance for me to introduction about myself. So I've been an entrepreneur for about 30 years. So when I was a PhD candidate in the University of Tokyo in 1995, I developed the first internet search engine in Japan. That was before the Google were founded and the Yahoo Japan were founded. So there are no search engine in Japan. So we developed search engine which people can search in Japanese languages, targeting the Japanese homepages. At that timing, Mr. Song, the founder of SoftBank, offered us to be acquired by 1 million US dollars. At that moment, we rejected his offer because we didn't know about the business model, or there are no success story of internet entrepreneur in Japan. And also, we thought that we didn't want to be controlled by adult because we were a child.
Mm-hmm.
But after that, Mr. Song fly to Silicon Valley and shake hands with the founder of Yahoo, Jerry Yang, and started Yahoo Japan. After that, also Google was founded in US and started to penetrate it into Japanese market. So in terms of business, we were defeated by Yahoo Japan and Google at that moment. But I was leading R&D in that startup. And after I started internet search engine company, I quit the PhD course on the way and focused on the internet businesses. But we were defeated by Yahoo Japan and Google in terms of business. At that moment, I was leading R&D of search engine, and I got a vision that next generation of search engine should combine the human knowledge and AI. Because even we analyze the context of the home pages, AI cannot judge this homepage can impress you or good, suitable for beginners. So only human can judge the context. So we started together the users' bookmark data, or users' comment, or users' link data, and so on. So that vision is a kind of idea of mixing Facebook and Google, Facebook and Twitter and search engine. That was in 2000. It was too early. There were no term of social media or big data or deep learning. There are no deep learning yet. So with that vision, I established a second company in 2000. And but it was too early. So it took 13 years to lead my company to IPO. So still I'm running that company as a chairman of that company. And now we are expanding our business in Japan and China and the US, and integrating and providing the social media big data solutions from worldwide social media data distribution business, social media data analytics, search businesses. On top of those two, we have social media agency businesses in Japan and China. This is my main business background.
Wow. I mean, that's just really inspiring. And, people can learn a lot from you with 30 years of experience. And, you're talking about the era that we did not even know about AI existed. And that's when you were trying to get it into the market. But I know right now you're onto something very interesting, which is FAMI, right? Can you share the story of what inspired you to start FAMI and that journey that led you to establish this nonprofit organization?
Okay, so just after I did IPO, I needed to pay taxes uh, because of the income by selling the stocks. So I donated some portion of the tax, allocate some portion of the taxes to the launching the first international dormitory high school in Japan.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't have a child, and I didn't have any interest in education, but the founder of that school has a great passion. I was impressed by her passion, so I allocated some money to launching the high school. Then I had to be involved in the management of the schools. Then, till that moment, I wanted to contribute to the evolution of the world through our business or our services. So I allocated all of my energy into my business and the companies for 20 years. But I just allocated some portion of the taxes to the company. Through that money, the children from around the world and the teachers who had a massive passion about education came into that small town in Karuizawa, Nagano Prefecture, Japan. And I could imagine that in 20 years, the alumni of that school can be the leader of their home countries, and they will change the future generation of those countries and the world. Then I was very shocked by that fact. Even although I use so much energy to my company, but just allocating some portion of the money, that can change the world in the future. So I thought that through 20 years experience of as entrepreneur, my wealth, my network, my experience, my knowledge, that is more than my expectation. That is more valuable than my expectation. So I thought that I should allocate more my what I have to something for social good.
Okay.
So I expand my eye and started to support many things. So one of those activities are FAMI.
Yeah, I mean, family has a very powerful mission to promote diversity in family structures, right? And but I would love to know, like, what drives your passion for gender equality and diversity, and how does it influence your work? And in particular, for those of the audience who do not know what FAMI is, we would love to hear a little bit about FAMI as to what exactly that initiative is all about.
Okay, so in Japan and almost all Asian countries, still same-sex marriage are not permitted.
Yeah.
And I have a transgender friend, and he transformed from female to male, and I supported his activity to change the Japanese society to accept LGBTQ people. And I used my network with the senators or government, the politicians, and I joined the Tokyo Rainbow Pride, and also I introduced some corporate benefit fitting to LGBTQ couples. But even those activity for several years, I realized that it's very, very, very difficult to change the law. And it will take more than 5 years or 10 years. But the people of LGBTQ people are struggling now and tomorrow. So I thought that we need to create some solution to solve this issue from today or from tomorrow. And also in Japanese society, government are very, very, very conservative, but many big corporations are thinking that they need to accept diversity and inclusions and the LGBTQ couples and so on, but they don't know how to do that.
Right.
So I got the idea combining the IT technology and the blockchain and those kind of will of big corporations to accept the LGBTQ couple. So that idea is that we are issuing the partnership certificate to LGBTQ couples on the Ethereum blockchain. Then, and also we persuaded big corporations to accept the LGBTQ couple with our certificate to provide the services for family, same benefit as legally married couple.
Right.
So now more than 80 big corporations, including Panasonic, Sega, Mizuho Financial Group, or security companies or life insurance companies, they are providing the corporate employee benefit, or they are letting the LGBT couple to be a beneficiary of life insurance, or allow them to sign the surgery agreement.
Right. When I got to know about your solution, I was like completely blown away, like how you use the Ethereum blockchain for issuing partnership certificates, and such a unique solution to a problem that exists in the society. And I'm pretty sure it has a much larger resonance, not just in Japan or US, but much larger global expansion possibilities as well. But what I would really want to know from you here is, more than 80 public companies, local governments that you have, kind of onboarded here. Also from your experience in terms of being an entrepreneur for 30 years now, what is it that you put in terms of relationship building to be able to enable all these things or get people on your side? That's something that other entrepreneurs could learn from you.
Let's see. So when I got this idea, so only idea existed. So no team, no money, and no client. So the first thing I did was clarify the vision. So to make the world accept different forms of a family unit through our services. So based on that, first I created that vision. Then with this vision, I created the very I collected the team members who has professional skills. One are blockchain company's CEO, one are Tokyo Rainbow Pride leader, and one are specialist of marketing, like that. Then I had second trust. First trust is good vision. Second trust is good members. Then I thought that we need more influencers who can make more influence on the Japanese big corporations or Japanese societies. So I went to the CEO of ex-CEO of Sony, Mr. Idei. She was showing much interest in promoting diversity and inclusions. So I approached him and presented my idea and asked him to be advisor of our project. He accepted my offer, and also ex-ministry became our advisor. Like that, another trust we created. Based on this idea, vision, team, advisories team, I presented to the several big corporations to join our family network, but they didn't trust us yet. And also because there are many NPOs who were trying to support the LGBTQ community. So their question is why we need to support you, and we cannot trust, you do not have any track record on LGBTQ activities and so on. So I asked to them to join the committee to investigate what kind of solution needed to support LGBTQ communities. Then I asked several big corporations who are eager to support LGBTQ communities. In that committee, I asked them to give us the criteria of what kind of solution you can accept in your business processes. So they gave us many criteria for example, protection for Floyd, or privacy issues and security issues and so on. So after we got all of the criteria, we made the system criteria or service plan to overcome those kind of criteria. So then they gave us a criteria to use services in the business criteria. We satisfied all of that. So they had to say, okay, if you develop this kind of services, we are going to use your services in our business process. Like that, step by step, we created the trust. So after Mizuho Financial Group became the first penguin of this project, another company started to follow. Oh, if Mizuho Financial Group use these services in their business process, we can follow that. Then after that, so we have first 20 big corporations when we release our services. Then if those kind of company can accept our certificate, many LGBT couples started to think, oh, in that case, why don't we apply for family certificate? Like that.
Right.
Relation of trust.
Interesting. There's so many lessons to be learned from here, and I'm pretty sure it comes from your year-long entrepreneur experience. But I think one of the first things you did, which was building a diverse team of volunteers with strong passion for gender equality. And that was very impressive. And I think you understood as well that you need to build credibility and you need to get advisors on board who could actually kind of improve the credibility of the project as such, so that you can access different corporates. And this is one of the things that I always talk to startups as well about, that, before you actually go out and talk about your idea, how do you build credibility? And I think having a community which feels strongly and passionately about that topic that you're really going to solve for, and at the same time having a board of advisors really helps. And that's exactly what you did. Could you also share with me, not just FAMI, but in general, as an entrepreneur, how have you approached building your professional network from the early stages of your entrepreneurial journey? Do you have any specific instances where networking connections played a pivotal role in advancing your business? or any notable collaborations or partnerships that have played a significant role in advancing any of your business's mission, where you would say building those relationships or networking the right way was actually the reason why I succeeded in certain entrepreneurial venture?
Okay. So in Japan, there are several communities around startups. One is Entrepreneur Network. It's for example, one is the Entrepreneurs Organization in Japan. It is called the EO Japan. Now, almost 1,000 entrepreneurs belong to that organization, and 10% of those members are public companies CEO, and they are having a monthly learning event as a group, and that community is very strong. So even in the startup company, they can learn from the unicorn company's CEO or next step CEO, like that. So those kind of line of steps, the entrepreneurs can learn from upper people. So that is a very important ecosystem in Japan. And also IT conferences. There are 2 or 3 major IT conferences. That is only for founders or investors, invited only. So in those conferences, people or entrepreneur exchanges the knowledge.
Right.
How to grow the company, how to make a company to the IPO, and so on. That is a community for entrepreneurs and the founders. So another community is that, another community is mixed by the entrepreneur, investors, and politicians, artists, and the gold medalists of the Olympics, and academics people. Those kind of conferences are there. So several top entrepreneurs are permitted to join that community. So through them, we can suggest many policies, ideas, or many things around the community. So easily, politicians can learn from entrepreneur and try to change the policy and the laws. And also, but by that, we are trying to change Japan drastically by the mixing of various kind of powerful peoples.
Interesting. And it's amazing. I mean, you're definitely a true believer in communities, which, I mean, I also believe that communities are actually most important when you're actually building a venture, and no entrepreneur can actually function in a vacuum. But what you're also talking about is very important, that it is not just the entrepreneur and the idea and the investor who are involved in making any business successful. It's also a lot of the other influencers in the space. For example, political influence, or the government, or also bigger stakeholders or companies that could have massive influence in your idea. And just being by connected to them and being visible with your ideas to them, you can also make a lot of difference, right? At the same time, how would you, because you're right now in San Francisco, right? And Japan and San Francisco are way different in the approach to startup ecosystem, as well as how things are perceived. How do you actually make your startups work or go and pitch to investors? Could you point out to some differences and also similarities between Japanese ecosystem and the Silicon Valley ecosystem?
So Japanese ecosystem, the density of Japanese ecosystem community is very high. and easily we can meet with many top people in various industries. But those are limited in Japanese market and the Japanese society. So the big problem with Japanese startups is that less diversity of the team and the client. So when we start our company, we organize management member by only Japanese people, and we target Japanese market. So when we secure Japanese market by our services, our competitors, big competitor in US, also occupy the US market. So after we occupy Japanese market and try to expand our business out of Japan, already US market are gotten by competitors. And also Japanese management member are made of Japanese people. So when they expand their business to overseas, they need to hire the person in charge of overseas businesses who do not know the process of from the startup to that business stages. But in case of the US, everybody come from around the world, and after they occupy the US market, easily they can expand their businesses to overseas because they have diversity of the members. So I think that is a big problem with the Japanese startup ecosystem, I think.
Yeah, I have been actually talking to and interviewing a couple of other people, and especially women in particular as well. And I've been hearing a lot about the one not having a very diverse entrepreneurial ecosystem for women as well, but also in general, the LGBTQ community, as you're also kind of working on, is also kind of left behind. And not just in terms of the ideas which are designed for them, but at the same time also the ideas which are coming from them. So I'm pretty sure that that government is looking into these initiatives as well in terms of adding some sort of interventions that could lead to more diverse entrepreneurship ecosystem. I was in the morning talking to Shiho Watabe, who is actually working for the Shibuya City Startup Accelerator. And she was telling me how they have been able to get up to 40% women entrepreneurs on board, and trying to really work on this, this issue, which is, I think, mostly all of the world, not just Japan, I would say. Tell me one more thing about FEMI here. So FEMI is actually addressing a sensitive and important issue, right? How have you leveraged your own personal brand and opportunities to talk about the issue, for instance, in media or through other channels or social media? Have you tried to do something around personal brand building to take this idea forward?
So my personal brand as a public company CEO was so much useful to start FEMI, because many nonprofit organization leaders doesn't have the experience of businesses.
Mm-hmm.
And I already have many connections, for example, with the ex-CEO of Sony or many public company CEO. So when I started my company, easily we can personally could access to those kind of people personally. Also, my Twitter account or social media account has a massive influence in the Japanese societies. So my post about FEMI is too new to them, but I could educate them through my past influence on them. So they got to know the issue of LGBTQ communities. And based on the trust I built in the past 20 years, they said that, oh, if Koki are so passionate about this project, I will support you. The
Right.
first trust was my personal trust.
Right.
Then step by step, I got next trust. Based on that pilation, I could go to the next step. So personal brand was so important.
Right. I mean, I believe you because, if you've been a serial entrepreneur and you've been successful, whatever you start now, it's just like I would say, if Elon Musk starts something today, everybody invests in it because, no matter what he does, he will be digging gold, right? So I think that's something which is very important, again, in terms of also not just doing something, but really being visible with what you're doing so people know about that.
So when they start their first step as entrepreneur, there are no asset. So what they have is only the passion, and not only passion but also vision, which impress other person to support him or her is very important. If he has a passion and a good vision, they can get a good advisors or good collaborating members. So based on those kind of members can support the lack of your influence as a first step. Or then first, for example, angel investors that also give you the additional credibility. So step by step, but the most important thing is the passion and the vision.
Absolutely. I mean, very true. I mean, you have a passion and vision, and then you start building credibility through people who are joining as collaborators. And I think it's also very important that if you have a mission and a vision, talk about it more often, give interviews, get yourself maybe some sort of media so that people know about your passion and vision, and then they start, coming along. So great advice there. It was amazing, all the insights. So one last question to you. For those who are aspiring to make a positive social impact like you, what advice would you give them based on your experience with FAMI in particular? And what personal qualities of a change maker are important in creating movements around such big challenges, at the societal level?
When I started my company, my goal is, for example, have a first client or create 1 million revenue, for example. Step by step, my target is getting bigger and bigger. Then on the way, I realized that if my target is only for my desire or my interest, I cannot get much support from anybody, corporate members or my client or partners or societies. So if we continue to grow, at some moment you get to know that you need to combine your desire and the social good.
Absolutely.
Then through that whole process, you get to learn many things, and you get to learn many skills and network and wealth and so on. At the last, we can contribute to the society. Without those kind of long history, you cannot instantly give good things, good impact to the society. So if you have the strong will to grow yourself, and so you can reach to that point.
Great. I mean, amazing wisdom here. I really like what you said in the end, that if you have your own desire and interest, you can only go that far. But if you look at the community and their desire and their solving for their problems and make them a part of a solution, then of course the sky is the limit. So thank you so much, Koki. It was wonderful to have you. Great insights there. And I'm hoping that a lot of people will get to learn a lot from this interview. Thank you.
So can I add one comment at the end? So about the family project, first I aim to support LGBTQ couples. So through these activities, I realized that without changing the law, we can change the society. Then I realized that beyond LGBTQ couples, many people are struggling for the traditional concept of a family. For example, some people, two pair of single mothers. Single mothers are struggling for raising children as well as working by herself. So, for example, if the two pair of single mother live together to support each other, but society does not recognize them as a family, so they cannot become the beneficiary of life insurance, or they cannot sign the surgery agreement with each others. So if we issue the family certificate for them, and if society recognizes them as a family, we can change the concept of family or marriage around the world, beyond the country's boundaries or regions. So I want to expand this initiative to around the world, but my network is so limited in out of Japan. So if some people who want to support or join this project, I'm willing to involve you to our project. Please contact me and support me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I would definitely be happy to send this message across the wonderful 4,000 plus Stanford community. And I'm pretty sure a lot of other people would love to join you on this cause. It's a great cause. Thank you so much for joining us today, Shiho. Helping startups thrive in the best city in the world, Shibuya, Tokyo, in Japan, is how Shiho likes to call her work at this point in time. She's also from Stanford University, and her journey is very fascinating. Why don't you tell us a bit about what you do and how you got to your current position right now, Shiho? We'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, thanks for having me, first of all. Yes, how I got to where I am. So first of all, my job is to put Shibuya City in Japan from Tokyo on the map. And how I do it is through creating global startup community here in the city. And I worked in the tech industry for about 15, close to 20 years, a little bit less than 20 years. And I started with Google marketing job, APMM program, great program if you're a new grad, thinking about a career in tech marketing. And I stayed in Google for about 10 years, and I worked in startups in various stages. And I worked in different countries, starting from Japan, Southeast Asia, Asia Pacific region overall, and then moved to Europe and worked in Africa and then Silicon Valley. So my journey has been really all over the map, literally. And yeah, so I do product marketing. I did product marketing before taking the current job, which is the CEO of a city-backed government-backed startup accelerator in Shibuya City.
Nice. And you've also worked with Google and Morgan Stanley and a couple of other companies which are really high profile. And how would you say these working in these companies has shaped the way you work today or got you the opportunities where you are actually aiming for?
Yeah, so I started my career with Morgan Stanley investment banking analyst position, which is kind of different from tech marketing. And I made the jump to tech marketing job. But I think the common thread in my career is I like to work with people who are great, who I feel like I share same values and culture and excellence. So I've been very lucky in terms of people that I work with. And that's been a common theme for across different jobs that I took in my career.
Yeah, I remember in the last conversation you said that most of the times your next opportunity was because of the person that you were actually already connected with or friends with. So how do you associate networking or building relationships to actually progressing in your career? And can you give us a few examples where it actually led you to some great opportunities?
Yeah, sure. So when I did many internship positions when I was in college, and that definitely built my foundation for what to come in my career after graduation. I made a lot of friends and I figured out what I was passionate about. And then when I started working, I realized that again, people matter so much. Like your mentors, your friends, you build these sort of like your tribe, and your really like a value system and guiding light in your career to that serve throughout your career. And in my case, it was all about the culture of the company and the people. So that's how I've made every single decision in my career, I feel like Asian cultures in general value relationship a lot. So who do you know? And have we gone to drinks like 5 times or 10 times? I think that tends to matter. And I think it's global. I think that happens in Silicon Valley or Europe or where have you. But I feel like relationship becomes very important in Japan, I feel.
And in that case, if you are an entrepreneur who's maybe, just starting something new, how do you actually build those relationships? How do you get to know those venture capitalists? Just showing up in a session and pitching your startup. Yeah, that your idea is great. Maybe you will be picked, but there are slim chances because you really need to be doing a lot more, relationship building before and after to be able to get to the funding that most, startups aspire to. So, how would anybody in Japan, do that? Like, do you have any advice, insights around that?
Yeah. Um, I think if you're an entrepreneur coming in from outside of Japan and has no connection, first of all, contact us. That's a little plug, but yes, I feel honestly, I think we can help you with that because we are well connected and we're helpful. And our aim is really to build ecosystem and community rather than investing in you and taking your equity. We don't take program fees or equity at this moment. Our pure intention is to help you to come into Japan and take a look at the Japanese market to really decide if you want to stay or leave or is there potential. That's why we really look at areas that matter to us the most, like age tech or fandom economy. Japan has a lot of IPs. So these are the areas that will have the most traction. And then for second advice would be to, just go to events and then talk to people and make friends. And there's no fast track to building a relationship, but you have to start somewhere. So there are a lot of English language startup events across the city of Shibuya or outside, and you can go to those and start networking.
Right. And you yourself, Shiho, you're at such an influential position, and you're like you said, you're actually making people connect with the rest of the world as well, right? So, in terms of your own position, how do you build relationships, with people who may be investors from Japan or outside of Japan? Are you doing any things that are particularly important in terms of building that network that could support Shibuya startups in return?
Yeah, I think it's really important to keep on talking about what you do. And in my case, it's not a hard job because I love what I do and I have a lot of fun talking about it. So I talk about my work a lot, especially around the people who are in the same industry or different industry, because we're all, I love learning from people who work in different industries as well. So that way we kind of connect the dots, right? Like, oh, that's what you work on, and this is what I work on. Maybe we can work together. So I really approach it like that, as a part of conversation and talking about what you do to different circles. And even if that might not result in short-term, quick partnership or any professional win, people will remember you. So that's part of, I guess, self-promotion or promoting, what you're passionate about and your intent to connect with other people, your intent to be useful for other people. I think that's really important to be expressed.
Most people in my research tell me that they forget to self-promote the work that they've been doing. They're either too humble about what they've been able to achieve in their life. And unless you talk about what you are able to achieve, what you have achieved in the past, nobody else will get to know about it. So you are the best, more or less the best brand for yourself. So in that context, do you believe in a bit of self-promotion, and how do you do that? And how do you approach, next opportunities, I would say, in terms of, for instance, I'll give you an example. Right now, you're giving this interview to me. You're also coming to the innovation tour to talk about what you're doing. This is all part of self-promotion and self-branding. A lot of people do not do that because they feel shy, or they feel that, no, that's not something I want to invest in. I don't want to be out there. People will know what I'm doing, but that's not the truth. That's not the reality, right? So maybe in that context, what do you think one of some of the tenets of your personal brand, and what did you do to get out there to be known for what you're doing, to gather the opportunities that you're actually after?
What did I do to be known? Yeah, I think for most of my career at, whether it's at Google, Macquarie, also Speak, they're all sort of very iconic, legendary companies that are led by amazing leadership. And I was not thinking about personal brand or, self-promotion. I think it's always seen as a negative thing to some extent, obnoxious self-branding. But I think self-promotion is not bad as long as there's a substance. And I think if you have something to contribute to the world, why not talk about it? Then someone might find you interesting, or someone might find you useful for them. And then you get to actually help people. So as long as you keep on building on the substance, that's the career part, very important part. And then you talk about what you can contribute, what you can do to serve the world. I think in that context, self-promotion is very important. And for me, it really gave me a chance to, I guess, be myself and my contribution to be known when I applied to volunteer for my hometown, Shibuya City, because that really made me this individual without company's brand. Like, I wasn't working at Google, I wasn't working at like a big name brand company, and I was just myself. And I talked about what I've been doing and what I can do today and tomorrow. And then that really was a constructive conversation, constructive self-promotion I did with the team at Shibuya. And they recognized that they could use me for the project that they were working on, building startup ecosystem in the city. So I was able to sort of shine in that moment because of the 20 years I had in the industry. So I think self-promotion is very important. The work leading up to the promotion, the moment, is very important as well.
Absolutely. I mean, I think, we have often said to people that you can be doing great work, but if nobody knows about the great work that you're doing, it's basically you're actually not doing service to anybody, because people do not know about it. They can't take your contributions. You cannot contribute to whatever is actually being built and having a greater impact. So I think that's exactly what you've been doing, Shiho. Great. And I remember one thing you said in our last conversation that we had. You said even in Japan, I think if you pick the right people to be around, you succeed. Can you tell me a bit more about that, as to, what were those strategic relationships that you made that have helped you be where you are?
Sure. So
And you said you've lived in so many countries, right? And you've really experienced the startup and innovation ecosystems in various different companies, different industries, different places. How would you describe, the Japanese culture, the entrepreneurship culture, and also, the current startup ecosystem in Shibuya, in Japan, in comparison to everywhere else in the world?
right. I think Japanese ecosystem, startup ecosystem, and VC ecosystem has really developed to match the unique environment that Japan is in. Japanese businesses and Japanese people with Japanese culture, I feel like in a best way possible, they're really unique. And the industry kind of developed with that unique environment and the society culture in Japan. So that does not mean Japan is massively behind. Japan is like a bad and Silicon Valley is good. It's more about the diversity, global diversity of the landscape, really.
And do you think that it's easier to do business in Japan, or is it more difficult to do business in Japan? Does innovation thrive more easily? How does the cross-pollination of ideas happen?
Not easy, not easier or harder. It's just different. And I think, if you worked outside of one country, like any startup is really reflection of the challenges that people are having in the society in that specific sort of moments, right? So it's really cultural specific. Like when Japan tries to do startup, it will look different from Silicon Valley startups, perhaps, because the problems that people are having are different. So when I took this job, I really thought about, okay, so what can Japan be really excelling in? Like, what are the unique problems that we're facing that can scale to the world? And things like aging of the society, earthquakes, or we have amazing tourism, like a food culture. A lot of people visit Japan for vacation, things like that, or even fashion, like street fashion. These are the areas that Japan's really unique in. And then it just makes sense for us to look at what are the problems that people are facing in this country, and then start from there. So in that sense, to answer your question, I think innovation can come from anywhere. It just it will develop differently. And it's kind of like there's no one metrics to define success. I can see the success metrics for startups could change depending on where you go. And Japan is no exception.
Right. And could you shed a little bit more light on what exactly you're doing in the Shibuya ecosystem in particular? What kind of startups? Like you said, age tech is something, for instance, you're working on, but any other areas, and how you're actually developing that ecosystem, taking the culture and the traditions in mind?
Sure. So because we are a company that is 41% owned by Shibuya City, and then private sector players, big companies in Japan are also behind us in terms of for the investors for my company. So we get to do something special. Like sorry, I'm getting a call. I'm declining. Anyhow. So we can provide visa support. So if you're a foreign entrepreneur coming into Japan, then we can support your visa application process. And we can fast track that. And usually it takes a lot of papers and a lot of time to get it done. But with us, you get the fast track path to obtaining visa. And also time and like many occasions, foreign founders told me that the biggest obstacle in starting a business in Japan is setting up a bank account. And it usually takes like anywhere from 6 months to 10 months for you to open a bank account for yourself or for your company. So we fast track that by partnering with one of the biggest banks in Japan. You can get your corporate bank account and personal bank account within a matter of like 1 week. And we also support foreign founders in growing their business. Once they get the hit the ground running, they can partner with big corporations through us and do POCs or really collaboration with big companies is one of the things that we are trying to work on with startups. What else? We can help you with like hiring, PR opportunities. We're so early in our company's stage, like we just started back in April. So our program itself is still evolving, and we're trying to develop any solutions for startups in the hope that we as a startup community builder try to find our product market fit. So that's where we are.
Right. And how would you describe the gender diversity in the entrepreneurs that are coming from the ecosystem or from the foreigners who are coming to get support from Shibuya City?
Yeah, that's a very important question. Sometimes I struggle to find women, or I guess people of color was the word that I was going to use, but that word is very American centric, US centric, and it might not mean anything dependent on where you take that word. So I will not use that word. But I feel when it comes to gender, it's so clear that we don't have enough female entrepreneurs applying. And that will definitely result in more male founders in our program. And I think dependent on which part of the world that I'm getting applications from, but sometimes it's really hard to find female entrepreneurs. Yeah, that's the situation. But when you look at areas like age tech is innovation that's serving populations that are affected by, aging in the society, caretakers, families, and elderlies. So that segment, that area has a lot of women. That age tech area attracts a lot of female founders.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel very hopeful that that's one area where I can find amazing female leaders and founders, co-founders. Something like 75% of caretakers are women, senior caretakers. And when it comes to childcare burden, Japan specifically has like a 98% women, like when it comes to childcare, like caretakers for kids and caretakers for senior citizens, it's 75% women. So that totally makes sense why more female founders are coming from this segment, because they know the problems, their firsthand experience of taking care of senior society, senior citizens, family members, or maybe they are professional caretakers in senior homes. So they know the problems in their hands, like real experience, and they probably jump into like age tech area. That's my guess. But I see better men-women ratio in starting a company in this specific segment, age tech.
And are you doing something about this gender gap as a Shibuya City Startup Accelerator to invite more applications from not just age tech, but in general for women to be more entrepreneurs?
Yes. So, let me add another example of one sector that attracts a lot of women, female co-founders. One is like age tech, right? As I mentioned. Another is something that's related to fandom. We call it like Oshi culture. Oshi is like a fandom economy. So we have one company called Stage Labs, and they're from Korea, and they are building tools online, like digital tools that connect K-pop stars with the fans. And fandom economy in that specific sector, for instance, K-pop or any pop, right, industry, it's predominantly women. So
Okay.
they're building products that have women in mind. And guess what? One of the co-founders is a woman. So I think it really starts from like, what kind of problems do you want to solve in this world? And if you're a woman, and if you know problems that you're facing in your lives, then you will get up and start businesses, and you become like an entrepreneur. So I think that's important perspective. Anyone can start something if you own social problems.
Right, right. Interesting. Thanks so much for sharing that. I mean, it's really interesting that, you talk about what the problems that usually you're facing are the ones which actually, move you to solve for a certain problem. And that's how you kind of become more entrepreneurial. But at the same time, would you see that there are any biases against women, or women themselves not having enough I don't know, enough agency to go and start something of your own? And I remember you said to me in one of your interviews that there was definitely a cost to taking maternity leave that you've taken as well. And a lot of women just go off and do things differently after, doing something in the corporate ladder after they have kids. How would you define your own journey in that context? You've clearly been like a superwoman, I have to say, right? I mean, you took a maternity break and then you again came back, and now you're the CEO of Shibuya Startups Ecosystem. So how did you do that? And what are some of the things that, maybe other women and entrepreneurs in general can take away from that?
Yeah, that's a really important question. And I feel there's no secret sauce in that problem. And I think everyone's journey is different. And mine was, I was working at Google, which was a fantastic workplace for women or men who have children, and all walks of life. They try to support you, and it's more like a long-term relationship that you have with the company. They try to support you in different times in your life, whether it's like sickness or childbirth, or even like marriage or death of your family members, which we're all going to have down the road, right? So one, I guess, tip is to work for a company that has strong culture that respects your life journey, and also to pick a team that supports you in living your own life, right? And then celebrate those life moments with you. And then naturally, it goes naturally. I think you're gonna have a easier time coming back to work or taking maternity leave, asking for maternity leave, paternity leave, what have you. So that's one thing. And I did struggle to going into maternity leave. I had twins, and I had uneventful pregnancy. Even then, it was very difficult. But then again, the team supported me. My manager was really understanding. Google overall was very understanding. So I was really fortunate. And I think the most important thing is not to stop running. You keep on going. Even if you're super slow, you stay in the race, which is really important. And I think, you know, sometimes it's frustrating because your peers might be getting promoted faster. Your, inner voice or your, previous self will tell you that, hey, you're supposed to be doing better. You're taking a break. You're supposed to be back 120% because you just took the last like 3 months of maternity leave, for my case, 6 months. There are those voices in your head and like external voices that you think you are hearing. But then again, in a long run, like the 1 year, 2 years of break shouldn't matter because you're in it for the long run. So that attitude is important, I think.
And in that case, if you are an entrepreneur who's maybe, just starting something new, how do you actually build those relationships? How do you get to know those venture capitalists? Just showing up in a session and pitching your startup. Yeah, that your idea is great. Maybe you will be picked, but there are slim chances because you really need to be doing a lot more, relationship building before and after to be able to get to the funding that most, startups aspire to. So how would anybody in Japan, do that? Like, do you have any advice, insights around that?
Yeah. I think if you're an entrepreneur coming in from outside of Japan and has no connection, first of all, contact us. That's a little plug, but yes, I feel honestly, I think we can help you with that because we are well connected and we're helpful. And our aim is really to build ecosystem and community rather than investing in you and taking your equity. We don't take program fees or equity at this moment. Our pure intention is to help you to come into Japan and take a look at the Japanese market to really decide if you want to stay or leave or is there potential. That's why we really look at areas that matter to us the most, like age tech or fandom economy. Japan has a lot of IPs. So these are the areas that will have the most traction. And then for second advice would be to, just go to events and then talk to people and make friends. And there's no fast track to building a relationship, but you have to start somewhere. So there are a lot of English language startup events across the city of Shibuya or outside, and you can go to those and start networking.
Right. And you yourself, Shiho, you're at such an influential position, and you're like you said, you're actually making people connect with the rest of the world as well, right? So, in terms of your own position, how do you build relationships, with people who may be investors from Japan or outside of Japan? Are you doing any things that are particularly important in terms of building that network that could support Shibuya startups in return?
Yeah, I think it's really important to keep on talking about what you do. And in my case, it's not a hard job because I love what I do and I have a lot of fun talking about it. So I talk about my work a lot, especially around the people who are in the same industry or different industry because I love learning from people who work in different industries as well. So that way we kind of connect the dots, right? Like, oh, that's what you work on, and this is what I work on. Maybe we can work together. So I really approach it like that as a part of conversation and talking about what you do to different circles. And even if that might not result in short-term, quick partnership or any professional win, people will remember you. So that's part of, I guess, self-promotion or promoting, what you're passionate about and your intent to connect with other people, your intent to be useful for other people. I think that's really important to be expressed.
Right. Perfect. I think thank you. Thank you so much. That sounds pretty good. I think I'm definitely going to get quite a bit of things out of this.
Are you
Uh,
sure?
yes, yes,
Sorry, I'm
definitely.
not like eloquent in many things. I think it's kind of important question, right? Like your question about women. And I think like what we really talk about, like in Shibuya City, is gender diversity is so important. And we want to do well because it matters for the next cohorts of entrepreneurs who are coming into Japan, right?
Mm,
So at the moment, 40% of our startups in our community have female co-founders, and
that's
we're really proud of that. It's pretty good. But the like numbers, total numbers of our cohort, total numbers of startups we support at the moment are not like 100 or 200s, right? But then again, still 40% of our cohorts is female co-founder, has female co-founders, and we're really proud. And we realized that supporting H Tech and supporting fandom economy, these things are kind of contributing to directly and indirectly contributing to the gender diversity that we managed to achieve.
right, right.
Yeah.
No, I mean, absolutely. I find this very important also. I mean, that is partly the reason why I wrote this book, because what I saw was this just 2% women across globally whose ventures are being funded, in despite the fact that a lot of them are actually building their startups. So one problem is if the women are coming out, and women and people of color, immigrants in different countries, I would say, wherever you are, in whatever context you are, they are not starting enough businesses. But even if they do, like you're saying, 40% of them are women. The second problem then arises is how many of them are actually funded or supported or mentored or sponsored. And I run an accelerator and incubator at Stanford GSB, and what we realize is that it's not just about how good your idea is, how innovative your ideas are, what is the impact that idea can have. Of course that matters. Without that, it doesn't work, right? But at the same time, if you're not able to communicate about your idea to a certain group of people who is in the power or capacity to fund your idea, either because you've not created a great story around it that is captivating enough, or you're not visible, simply not visible. And you're not visible because you're not self-promoting what you're doing, you're not building communities around what you're doing, you're not networking, you're not building relationships with investors. Then the people who have less than good ideas are doing all of those things, they succeed, and that's a pity. So my idea around doing this particular talk, and as well as writing the book, is there is a certain skill set that you need to be able to get out there with your great idea that already exists, right? You said, Shiho, yourself, you've been doing great work, you are authentic, you're doing all the things right? But is that only enough for you to succeed? You yourself said there are more people who might be better than you or are at the same level as you, but they do not get noticed, or they are not in those positions. And I think partly the reason is that, one, they do not have that dedication and resilience that you talked about. It's a long-term race. Just keep at it. You cannot just stop because you've got a failure. One thing is that. And then at the same time, it's also how much you're self-promoting. If you don't talk about what you're building, how would people know? If you don't go and build relationship with people who have the capacity to invest in you or support you, how would you get ahead? So that's a separate part of building your venture, building your idea, or taking your career beyond. But most people do not focus enough on that part. They just focus on the idea. They just focus on, yeah. Your thoughts around that?
Yeah. I feel like it's really common among women. I hate to gender stereotype, but that's like a trait, what people say all the time. And yeah, there's that. And I think it helps other people if you start talking about what you can do to the world, right? what you can do for you, what you can do to help. I think it's really useful information. So while like you worked this hard, so might as well talk about it, and someone might hear you and find you useful. So having that, you know, there's no risk in talking about what you can do to help other people. There's no, maybe there is a cost. Your time matters. Your self-promoting, it takes time, but there's no risk. So I think we should all encourage each other to, you know, talk about what your contribution to the world is. And I think that kind culture of seeing everyone and seeing value in everyone's work, I think it starts from there.
Absolutely. Great words
Yeah.
there. Thank you. Thank you so
Yeah.
much, Shiho.